Well, welcome, and thank you. Thank you so much for jumping in and taking this book study with us. This book study that we're going to look at this book called Homes of Hope. It's the story of YWAM, one of our mission partners that we're going to be doing an incredible project with. And we're excited to share this project with you and excited for you to be a part of it. But it's not just the story of Sean Lambert. It's not just the story of YWAM, this organization that he's a part of. It's the story of you. It's the story of me. It's the story of all of us. What happens when we're able to look at the world that we're a part of and see how God could use us to make a positive impact in it? At the beginning of the story, Sean starts to tell his story about how God got a hold of his heart, broke his heart open to see the need of the people who were around him, the needs of the people that were around him. I'll never forget when I was in seminary, I had the opportunity as a part of my seminary experience to work with a homeless shelter. Homeless shelter was called Churches United for the Homeless, and one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was to be a chaplain there, to walk along people spiritually and emotionally. But I also had the opportunity to help them physically at times. One afternoon when I was working at Churches United for the Homeless, I was asked if I would help this gentleman move from transitional housing at Churches United for the Homeless into a home that he'd be able to call his own. And so now he was going to be able to have his own place with a door that he could lock on his own. It was the first time that he could do that in quite some time. And so I was able to use the pickup truck from the shelter. And I spent the afternoon taking furnishings from that had been donated to him and to help him move into his own place. And I remember as he and I were driving around that day and loading all of his stuff into his new apartment, I remember being overwhelmed by something. I remember being overwhelmed that this person was encountering experiences that I had never experienced before. Now we can get into the nuts and bolts of why this person could possibly be in the position that they were in, but I don't believe any of that really matters. What I realized in that moment was that there was something that I had the opportunity to have, and in doing so, I had the opportunity to give. Not because it was about me, but because God had placed me in that situation at that time to shine his light into the world. And I wonder what that is for you. It's in the very beginning of this book in chapter 1. Sean Lambert talks about the mission that he has for YWAM. Something that had gotten onto his heart, and it just came out that his mission is to engage a broken world with God's generosity. To engage, to literally be a part of the world, to engage the world, to come into contact with the world. It's so easy at times for us to be removed, to be distanced, to maybe spend the most time with the people who are the most like us. But what God calls us to do is to engage the world, to be people who are sent into the world and to engage it and to share the generosity that we have with the world and with the people who desperately need us. And so my question as we get started on this book study is, what could God do through you for the sake of the world? You might be reading this book and you might say, you know what, I just don't have a story like he does. I don't have the miraculous stories, the things that seem so obvious. Like you read through it and you say, man, there seems to be so many lightning bolt moments that if it were like that for me, it would be so easy to engage the world with God's generosity, but I don't know if I've ever had that. I don't think it's all about the lightning bolt experiences. In fact, I think that so many of us may only have a few of those in our entire lives. But what it gets down to is to ask yourself the question of, what do I have? And what does the world need? Maybe to engage the world with God's generosity in your context means to enter the place that you work with a smile, to treat people with kindness, with dignity. Maybe it means to volunteer at different ministries within Lutheran Church of Hope, to say, you know what, I have time and I have warmth and I have compassion and I have the ability to be a part of what's happening in this place. Maybe it's to be involved with one of our mission partners, like YWAM, like we'll be doing through this project. What do I have that God could use to contribute to the needs of the world? It's really easy to make it incredibly complicated. It's really easy to make it seem as if It has to be this thing that could only exist on the billboards of life. Like if this thing isn't what we would perceive to be billboard worthy, then maybe God doesn't think it's worthy either. A little challenge to that. Think about some of the things that have been done in your life. Some of the people that have encountered you in your day-to-day life that have had the greatest impact in you, on you, through you. Chances are those people who encountered you with generosity probably didn't think that those were billboard moments either. Many times it's doing the little things consistently with the people that God's placed in front of us. The story comes about St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi has a remarkable story, incredibly remarkable story. He was living in the land in which his dad had a lot of influence. His family was incredibly wealthy. But as Francis at that time, as Francis was walking through the streets of his town, he saw that there are a whole lot of people that didn't have nearly as much as he had. And he couldn't reconcile that. He couldn't reconcile that the thing that separated him from these people, in some regards, only seemed to be circumstantial. That he was born into a certain family, that he was born into a certain environment. And there were others that weren't, others that hadn't. And so as he's going through the streets of his town and seeing the plight of so many people, he starts to ask himself, what do I have that could benefit what others don't? And so he goes to his father one day and he tells his father, I'm going to give everything that I have away. And his dad wants to talk sense into him because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that Francis would show that kind of hospitality, that Francis would show that kind of generosity, that he would humble himself in such a way to even associate with people like that. And so his dad literally took Francis to a priest in their town and said, hey, could you talk some sense into this boy? And it's told that Francis, he took off his outer garments and he laid them all down and he said, I don't want to just stand at a distance and have compassion for these people. I want to live with these people. I want to be incarnational, we could say, from a church perspective. It says that St. Francis of Assisi, he said that we should preach the gospel. Tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ at all times, with every breath that we have, with all that we have, wherever we are, whatever context we are with, no matter who it is that we're with. Preach the gospel. Tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ at all times. But it's quite interesting. He says, use words only when it's necessary. I think it's Jesus that says, they'll know that you are my followers by your love. They'll know that you're people who follow my way of doing life by the way you encounter the world with God's generosity. It's John chapter 3:16. And Jesus is having a conversation with a guy who by the worldly standards had everything, but by his own admission was missing so much. He couldn't understand what Jesus was talking about when he was telling him that the world wasn't about gaining prestige and power and status. But it came with being in a relationship with God. So Jesus says, after that encounter, in that encounter with Nicodemus, he says, this is how God loved the world. By giving his one and only Son. By humbling himself, Paul will say in Philippians chapter 2, God showed how much he loved himself by not counting equality with God as something to behold, but emptying himself and taking on the form of a human being to become incarnate, become in flesh with the world around him. And I believe that's how you and I are called to live our lives. That's what was so convicting that you'll read about in this book. It's what Jesus says when he says, I tell you the truth, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. When you served them, when you fed them, when you gave them something to drink, when you had compassion on them, when you stepped out of your own comfort zone and into their zone of discomfort, when you did it to them, you're doing it to me. Because it matters. Because this world that we occupy with one another is filled with people, not that just we love, or we try to get ourselves to love, or we try to convince ourselves that we ought to love them. We love them because they matter to God. Every single human being on the face of this planet, every human being that's ever been on the face of this planet, or whoever will be on the face of this planet, they matter to God. And so they matter to us. And so who is God calling you to do that to? For? Through? Who are the ones that matter most to God in your sphere of influence? The places that you go. Not just the billboard moments, not just the billboard places that you go, but the places where you find yourself every day. You don't have to travel across the world to do it. You can do this in your own neighborhood. You can do this in your own community. You can do this in your own family. Radical acts of love happen when we see people the way that God sees them. And so as we go through this book study together, as we dive into it, as we continue to look into our own hearts, our own minds, when we start to look at it, we start to see that people are the people that God loves. And so just as God loved us, we should love other people. Just as God has shown his radical love and grace and compassion to us, we ought to do it to other people. This is going to be an exciting ride. This experience that we're going to have with one another, it's going to be transformational. And so I pray and I hope that this is a transformational journey to you, where your heart is reignited with love for the world around you. It's going to be an exciting ride. Thank you so much for being a part of it. You'll want to continue to watch through all of these videos because there's a special guest in the last video you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much. God bless you.